As the Yankees lead in game two of the three-game set against the Minnesota Twins, we come to you with the newest edition of Bomber Boys. Justin Chevalella, Dylan Price. We might be in good moods for once. We'll have to see. The Yankees got a big win in game one of the series against the Twins. They lead 5-1 in the bottom of the sixth as we record this on this Tuesday night. We'll get into all the latest around the New York Yankees. Some guys getting hot, some guys not so much, and all the conversation there is to be had. But as always, first, Dylan, how are you?
I'm doing well. This is officially the latest that we have come at you with the Bomber Boys yet. So if there is some sleep deprivation or delusion on display, maybe you'll hear it in our takes, but you might be able to sense it in my eagerness, excitement right now, despite the fact the Yankees are clinging onto a playoff spot. I've got energy, man. I'm pumped. I'm ready to go. How are you?
Yeah, I mean, same boat. Now, for me, because I'm still on my little vacation here, hiatus from the work field, this is just the start of my night. Normally the Xbox is on right now and, up till 12, 1 o'clock, but I can channel the energy here. I got to keep it a little low. Mom and brother trying to go to sleep because they actually have real world jobs, but and you also have a job to go to tomorrow morning. So we try to keep it quick. I can tell you it probably won't happen, but let's just get right into it. And we start with the newest closer potentially of the New York Yankees. The David Bednar deal is finally coming through. He has seemingly taken the closer role, although Aaron Boone probably won't ever come out and say that word for word, especially with all the different egos in the Yankees bullpen, from Devin Williams to Camilo Doval, as well as Luke Weaver, and of course David Bednar. But Bednar came out of the bullpen yesterday to close out the 4-run victory for the Yankees. Not a save, but he is being pitched in those roles now. 5 appearances, a 2.57 ERA, 1-0. He is 1-3 in save opportunities, but 7 innings, 5 hits, 2 runs, both of which were earned, 12 strikeouts to 3 walks. And if you exclude that horrible outing in Miami to start his Yankee tenure, 5 1/3 of no-run baseball.
It's been a really, really nice start outside of, as you said, that kind of disaster of a game as a whole in Miami that we're just going to forget about that series. It's gone. Miami fans will probably cling on to it for the next decade since that was their first series sweep of the Yankees.
You
But
got to give them something. You got to give the
I mean,
Marlins
yeah,
something. It's been a really long time since they won.
look, good for them, but I think the big thing is that, you have that rough stretch, and for some people that was indicative of how the start of their Yankees tenure was going to go. And for Bednar, it always felt like he was kind of the outlier in that respect. I mean, this is a guy that I told you, and you and I think we're in the same boat here, where we said he was the move that I was most excited about. I believe you felt the same. Maybe it was just because he has maybe one of the best entrances currently going in baseball. I'm a sucker for Renegade, even though I'm not the biggest Steelers fan, but I'm glad he brought that with him, and the lifelong Yinzer is bringing that energy to Yankee Stadium, and he's also bringing the results. And I think that's what the Yankees have lacked all season in the closer spot. Luke Weaver did a hell of a job in the postseason last year in that capacity after Clay Holmes bottomed out and had to be moved to a lower leverage spot as a setup man instead of the closer that he was meant to be. And this time around, they brought in multiple options. I mean, you had Weaver back, you had Williams, and I'm going to try to say nice things about him today and not go off like we did last week. And when it comes to that, though, you had 2 options. Now you really have 4. And I think the clear best one, both in terms of his early results between what he's done this season and in his track record as a whole outside of an outlier in last season, is Bednar. Bednar's been the most consistent guy. Bednar's been the guy that I made this comparison the other day on the Catskill Sports Report, and it's the name that until you texted me the other day, I've been looking for to describe him. He's got very Jabba Chamberlain vibes. He brings the energy, brings the passion. He's a fiery guy, and I think that's what the Yankees have been lacking. You mentioned right there, there's egos. There's 4 guys who have can stake a claim to being a closer. But the reality is that talent takes precedent, and actually showing the fire, the side that we loved about Luke Weaver last year that I think is slowly matriculating itself back into the fold. Camilo Doval shows the fire with his arm, but now you want to see that same passion as well, and maybe not some errant throws to second. For Bednar, things have been consistent as consistent can be, and for a closer spot that has significantly lacked that this year with Devin Williams, I think this has been the best move Aaron Boone could make. And I think if he had made it a couple games sooner, the Yankees might be in a better spot in the postseason race right now, because Devin Williams has certainly cost them his handful of games this season. But if from here on out, Bednar is the guy, they don't try to transition Devin Williams back to that. They don't try to throw anybody else in there other than on a day Bednar might need some rest. I'm happy, man. I think this is the Yankees getting their closer of not just this year, but maybe the long-term future.
Yeah, I mean, and David Bednar really shot onto the scene with 2 5-out outings out of the bullpen. It was one that got the save to secure a salvage of this series against Texas last week, and he had the runners on base to tie the game, but he came through when it mattered. You know, he talked Aaron Boone out of pulling him, and honestly, I was watching that game, and I thought Aaron Boone should have pulled him. And when he left him in, I said, with the way this season is going, this move is going to come back to haunt the Yankees. Sure enough, it didn't. And from there, it just feels like his next couple appearances, and I know he technically blew a save, although the runner wasn't his responsibility against Houston over the weekend. They still got the win in that game, and it feels like he's really indebted himself to Yankee fans already. The Yankees have been looking for a closer, or at least someone to take that role because, Williams started in it. He struggled. Weaver took it, but then he got injured. Williams took it back, but then struggled. Weaver couldn't really ever grasp it again. And now you have, Bednar able to come in and be solid, was solid with the 4-run lead yesterday, and remains to be seen if he'll come out tonight if the Yankees need him. But that's another luxury you have because you have David Bednar producing like he was supposed to, but you still have Doval who can come in. You still have Weaver and Williams, like you said, on days that Bednar might not be able to come out and pitch. The Yankees hate throwing a guy 3 straight days, and I mean, completely reasonable at this point. Nobody really does that anymore. So you think of what he's been able to do, and it's certainly a welcome sight for, the Yankees and obviously Yankee fans. And it's just the bullpen itself has needed a staple so that the rest of the pieces could fall into place. And now that you have Bednar in the 9th, you talk about Weaver being the 8th, Doval being the 7th. Things have taken place to the point where the Yankees bullpen is now performing better too. And that's what we've been looking for. I mean, the bullpen had an ERA over 7 for over a month and a half of baseball. And that's not going to win you games. And it's certainly not going to win you playoff games if you get there. So with everything starting to fall into place, it started with Bednar and it just continues to extend down. You still have Tim Hill in his role to come on and provide, against lefties. Even if we want to talk about how bad Devin Williams was, he came in the other day in the 6th inning and had a 1-2-3 inning against Houston. That's the type of role at this point that Devin Williams is good for, and the Yankees have enough deep, good depth that you don't need Williams in the 7th, 8th, or 9th, and maybe at some point he earns himself a spot back late in the innings. But, David Bednar got rid of that Miami appearance where he really struggled. And the same could be said for Camilo Doval. Doval had a rough appearance over the weekend against Houston, but it was his second appearance of back-to-back appearances over the weekend. But 5 appearances, 4 innings, 5 hits, 5 runs, 2 of which were earned, 3 strikeouts, which is low for him, and 4 walks. So it hasn't been pretty, but he had 3 scoreless outings spanning 3 1/3 after his horrible debut and before that situation against Houston over the weekend. So we start looking, Jake Bird's not on the team, but the 2 guys you got at the 2 other guys that are here and in the big leagues that you got at the deadline for the bullpen, they're performing and they're helping your team start maybe turning things around.
Yeah, we talked about it the day we went live at the deadline. We talked about it the day in the days leading up to the deadline, and we can kind of make that same sentiment now when it comes to Duvall and when it talks to Bednar. These are the guys you needed. These are the guys that if you wanted to have any legitimacy in a run this season and to really try to chase 28, that was one of the 2 biggest glaring needs on this team outside of the hot corner and maybe depth as a whole. But I think when you talk about the back end of the bullpen, there was the uncertainty. There was whatever you want to call it. Duvall starting to get his head on straight. Bednar's obviously been stellar since that one blemish on his game or on his resume. That was a game that I think everybody would like to forget about. And Jake Bird, like we said last week, it's a matter of time, I think, for him. I think this is a move that shows that they're invested in him. So I still think that there's a lot of hope to be had with how these 3 additions have panned out. And although the position player additions haven't necessarily looked great because of injuries, I still think you like what you see from Ryan McMahon, and it's already an improvement over what you had with Peraza. So far, so good from what they did at the deadline for the most part, holistically, despite the fact there's been some injuries and the bird blemish on kind of the resume right now. But the highlight of it all is the fact that the Yankees look like you said, like I said, that they finally kind of have their true closer that they've been longing for really this entire season, and really going back to last offseason when they made a move that I think everybody would go back and reverse now for Devin Williams.
Yeah, and I mean, you think about the moves right after that Miami, atrociousness on that Friday night. Everyone was questioning: was it worth giving away your number 8 prospect, your number 14 prospect, your number 19, your number 25, and the other guys you gave away for Bednar and Duvall, and obviously Riggio and Shields going for Bird? And those questions have subsided outside of Jake Bird, but Bird, it's only going to be a matter of time. The rosters expand to 28. I'd expect him to come up in September. He's a pitched twice in AAA coming into today, 3 runs, 2 of which were earned in 2 innings. He's in a little bit of a struggle, but I mean, the Yankees have so many years of him. And if what this bullpen is showing is anything for the future, the Yankees should be excited about everything they got. You talk about the position players injured as we talk about the rest of the deals. Austin Slater still on the 10-day IL. Ahmed Rosario crashed into the wall the other day. He was placed on the 10-day IL. He said he was more day-to-day, but the Yankees felt it was a little bit more long-term. But it seems like he'll be back on the Yankees when that injury list expires. Obviously, Ryan McMahon has been Ryan McMahon. A little bit of a struggle at the plate lately. He's trending in the wrong direction over his last 7. However, it's Ryan McMahon. He's been great defensively, and you can make up for his little bit of lackluster performance at the plate, considering the guys that are starting to heat up at the plate. And then Jose Caballero has kind of been a guy that's defensive replacement and base runner, hasn't really seen too much at the plate. So realistically, we came in and we, pounded the table and, we're panicking maybe a week ago about all the trade deadline acquisitions. But like you said, Dylan, it's starting to turn around, and it's allowing for the Yankees to panic a little bit less. And that brings up the pinstripe panic meter, considering there is still some room for panic. Aaron Judge, now he does have a home run tonight. This was made prior to tonight's action. He was 4 for 19 since coming back from the IL with just 2 runs batted in, no extra base hits until his first inning home run that tied the game. The Yankees lead 5-1 at the moment in the top of the 7th. And then Max Fried continues to struggle. So we'll look at this holistically first. Dylan, what is your pinstripe panic meter considering the two biggest names on the Yankees, the ace of the staff and the best hitter, have been in a struggle? Where would you put your panic 1 through 10 to 1 decimal place?
I have 2 panic ratings. I have my legitimate panic rating, and then I have a separate panic rating that we'll talk about. Legitimately, I don't know why this was a subject. I mean, I do, but I don't. You saw me shaking my head. And obviously, since you planned this earlier today to now, Judge getting the home run didn't necessarily help the case. But I actually do see why you did what you did. I just think this is one of the sillier panics that we've had to do, because I think we're talking about 2 guys that are perennial veterans in this game that have figured it out and come out of slumps before. And when you talk about Max Fried, it's obviously concerning because of that statistic you have right there. Since June 13th, what he's posted is definitely worrisome. I think when you talk about Max Fried, you talk about a guy that I think the real story should be 2.94 ERA in 24 starts with a 12-5 record and 135 strikeouts. If you gave me that line, those marks for Fried when they signed him in the offseason and told me that Garrett Cole would be out and he would be the ace, I would tell you that this is exactly as advertised, and I'd be ecstatic in what you got. The problem is why he's on here, and why I do give you some merit in putting this on the panic meter, is that this guy was pretty much staking a claim to just be second on the ladder to Tariq Skubal for the Cy Young. I mean, that's that big of a fall off since June 13th from Fried. And he's not going deep into games anymore, which was kind of the staple the early part of the season. You said something a couple shows back that has kind of been, percolating the back of my mind for a while, to steal a word out of your playbook. It's that Fried doesn't pitch this long into a season. And this is the longest we've seen him really go in some time. And, you look at the innings numbers he's had. 174 and a third last year. He started 29 games. For 14 games in 2023, dealt with some injuries, 77 and 2/3. 185 and a third in 22, 165 and 2/3 in 2021. in all likelihood, with the amount of games that are left, the amount of starts left on the docket for Fried, which there aren't as many as it really seems, he could go for a career high in innings. He was on pace for it until things kind of teetered off. So you're talking about a guy who hasn't had that many innings in some time, that level of volume, that level of pressure, and it feels like it's starting to kind of eat up on Fried. And so for me, the Fried panic meter should be separate than Judge, but because Judge has also had his struggles since coming back from the injury, and because you and I both think that this isn't Judge at 110%, and we're not going to see him at 100% for some time, even when he goes back into the field, my panic meter is more like a 4-3. Maybe you could convince me up to a 5-3 because I think if you look at the season holistically for Fried, you'd be happy with the numbers you've got. But when you look at what he's done in these last 7 versus those first 17 as you have it there, it's worrisome. And it's really worrisome the amount of innings he's going into games because despite the fact that you've started to solidify this bullpen in the past couple weeks, this isn't a bullpen that was kind of backing Fried in those last 7 starts. So you had kind of the perfect storm of Fried struggling, Fried not going as deep into games, and then you put the bullpen in, and who knows what you were going to get. You had Jekyll and Hyde out there. So the reality is that Fried kind of struggling has only been amplified because of the bullpen struggles through that same time span. So for me, Fried, I'm still not pulling the panic meter because I think that he's got what it takes to get back on track. This has been a lot of pressure, a lot of a workload on him this season. And if he had kept the rate he was at, it was going to be a career high in innings pitched. Now, not so sure. But if he can get back on track, he can get his head back on straight. Rodon stealing tonight, Warren shoved the other night. It feels like if the bullpen can pick up their end of things, the rotation's starting to get a little bit of mojo here, and maybe that's something that for the first time this year, Fried can feed off of and not the other way around because it felt like everyone else was using him as a measuring stick. Like I said, for me, Judge isn't necessarily as big of a concern because I think he's still banged up, and the fact that he's still being semi-productive with that injury, he's still better than anything else you could have out there, and I think that's why I'm not panicking as much because when you look at the alternatives, Judge is still the best case scenario, even if he's at 70%, which I think he's at right now.
Yeah, I mean, I would tend to agree on the point about Judge. I put Judge because obviously it's a concern, but I think the statement that we always hear from everyone, around the Yankees is Aaron Judge being in the lineup, even if he's not being productive, changes the game, right? Somebody's going to get good pitches to hit, whether that be the guy in front of him or the guy behind him, especially when you can get Giancarlo in the lineup like they've been able to his second straight night in right field tonight, and he's been fine out there defensively. That's when your lineup is producing, and that's what you see. So for Judge to be there and hitting, or not hitting, it's still fine. Now, the bigger concern would be the 240 average that, since June 13th. But then you look at the on base percentage, it's still 372. The slugging still over 530. That, you kind of look at and you go, something's not there. It's kind of like the Ben Rice conversation we had earlier that you're still getting on base, you're still hitting, but you're not getting necessarily the results. I think the average would be the concern, and you've seen it because it's been highlighted since he got off to such a hot start. We're talking about on June 13th, prior to that start of this, recent rough stretch, he was batting 392. His on base percentage was 488. His slugging was 776 at the time, 25 homers and 59 runs batted in. His strikeout number since June 13th, certainly higher than you want it to. That would be the one concern. But at the end of it, for him to be in the lineup, it's good enough right now, and he's only going to get better. And we saw it tonight. My concern heading into tonight was that it didn't look like he was able to lift the ball. The last couple of games, it was either strikeout or seemingly a ground out. Tonight, he obviously lifts a long home run in the first inning, so that kind of put that to waste. Again, the later start time here today kind of threw a wrench at the plans and the whole, setup. But for Max Fried, I sort of disagree. And I think it should be a little bit more panic than you're bringing it out to be. And maybe when you average the Judge panic with the Max Fried panic, it comes out to that 5.3. I might have it more at like a 6. But I mean, Max Fried he's been struggling for now over 2 months, right? Or I guess a month and a half. This started on July 1st. His last 7 starts, you see the numbers going on your screen below you. And it just feels to me that Max Fried was supposed to be the stopper. He was the guy that after the losses would put the Yankees on his back and get them back in the win column. Now, I went through today and saw that he is 9-1 in his first 17 starts or the Yankees were 9-1 in his first 17 starts after a loss. They're 3-1 in his last 7. So they're still winning just under 500 now. So it hasn't been the same. And to go along with that, there's obviously been games after wins that he goes and loses to, and he can't seemingly be the guy to put a stop on it. Now, on the same note, like you said, Will Warren had a great outing yesterday. Carlos Rodon got through 7 here today. The Yankees, those are the first guys to go over 6 innings in quite some time, or at least get into the 6 in Warren's case, and then for Rodon go 7 tonight in quite some time for the Yankees. That hasn't happened. Fried was supposed to be that guy. He has fallen off, and I think the reason I'm probably a little bit more concerned is because what you talked about. You were talking about the innings with Max Fried, and if you look at it this way, after his best inning of work, or best year in terms of innings of work, which was 185 and a third back in 2022, he missed a large portion of the next season with injury, making just 14 starts in 2023. Now, he went 174 innings last year and already 144 this year. So the concern for me would be, is there something bigger picture here for Max Fried that could be leading to this, I don't want to call it a disaster. He's still serviceable, but to this decline, right? You saw after his biggest workload, he gets hurt. Now, last year was his second largest workload, and he's starting to slow down. And you also look at the fact that in a 162 game season, a starting pitcher, if fully healthy the whole year, is going 33, 34 starts. Max Fried pitched in 33 games in 2019. He pitched in 30 in 2022. He pitched 29 last year. What that says to me is every year at some point he has missed some time and missed a couple of starts, likely due to an IL stint. And to me, that might be where the Yankees are at. He had the blister problem. Right now, the Yankees keep talking, or Yes Network keeps mentioning he's not using his breaking ball as much. Is there discomfort when throwing it? Obviously, this is just me throwing these ideas out there. I just think there's something a little bit more behind Fried's than obviously we know what is behind Judge's struggle at the current moment, which is just getting back after the IL stint. But for me, Max Fried, the large workload for a second straight season, it feels like this could just be him trying to get to the finish line of this year. And then maybe he's got some, stored away in an extra tank for the postseason. But I'm a little bit more concerned. I'd probably go 6.0 here when you're the biggest name in your lineup. And I know he's coming back from injury, and the biggest name in your starting rotation are struggling. That's not a recipe for success, specifically if these struggles go long-term to the postseason.
And I think you echoed a little bit of my early sentiment and my panic there that I mentioned about, we haven't seen Fried go this deep because he's missed some time with injury in the past and he's missed some games. And, he's still on pace to set a career high in terms of innings pitched this season because he hasn't missed that time. But as you were kind of making your point, just to try to see if I could help my own case or help yours, I went back through his game logs from last year and went through what happened after June around this same time. June 29th last year, he pitched a pretty solid outing, 6 innings, allowing just a run on 6 hits against Pittsburgh at home. 2.91 ERA was where he sat at that point in time. Over that next course of his outings, until around this time, his ERA blossomed to 3.62 last year. He had a really rough stretch right around this same time last year. It would continue to kind of go until that next following outing where he would go 7 innings against Philadelphia in a tough loss. And then he'd get into that backstretch of the season. And it was kind of like you just alluded to there. It felt like he had a little bit more in the tank. And for an Atlanta team that was crippled by the Acuna injury last year, it was Fried who had some bright spots at the tail end of the season for them. His final outing even was his perfect kind of stamp on the resume for his free agency stint of 8 2/3, a near complete game against Kansas City where he allowed just 3 hits. So Max Fried's a guy who hit this same swoon last year. Maybe he's like the Yankees. Maybe it's rhythmic. He goes into this same kind of swoon like the June swoon, July swoon the Yankees do. Maybe it's kind of just second nature for Fried. But I think the reality of it is more so of what I hit off the top, and then you just kind of reiterated there that this is the biggest workload we've seen with Fried. This is the most pressure that's been on Fried. This is the biggest, you said, he's been the stopper for this team this season. This most pressure has been on Fried in his career. He was trusted to do something he wasn't supposed to do, be the ace of this staff. And to all accords, he's still done a damn good job. But when you look at these last 7 outings, it definitely leaves a sour taste in the mouth. So I understand where you're coming from in that panic sense. Like I said, you probably could have convinced me to a 5-3. I still settled in at more of a 4-3 because who we're talking about here at the end of the day are two of the best players on this team, probably the two best players on this team when you look at who's healthy and look at the resume and the body of work this season. But speaking of resume and body of work, my other panic meter that I kind of alluded to is the MVP race. Because the Cy Young race, we can throw that completely out the conversation with Fried's struggles and how well Scooble's continued to pitch, and other guys have stepped up as well. You could even make a case for some guys out there in Texas with how good they've done. But the MVP race, I don't think it's Cal Raleigh reeling Aaron Judge in. I think it's Giancarlo Stanton. I'm kidding. But the reality is that I think we're going to see a legitimate debate. And I think that's kind of where we're tracking at this point, because the gap that Cal Raleigh has been able to post in terms of home runs and RBIs in these last couple games that Aaron Judge missed, and then as he kind of went through his struggles here, Raleigh leads baseball with 45 home runs, 247 average, is not going to light the world on fire. 98 RBIs, also really, really solid. And I think when we get to the end of the season, the conversation is going to kind of just be this. Judge is going to lead in average. Judge is going to lead in OPS. Judge is going to lead in WAR. Raleigh is going to have a significant drop-off in batting average, significant drop-off on base percentage, but he's likely going to be in front of Judge in home runs and likely going to be in front of Judge by a decent bit in terms of runs driven in. In terms of team performance, that could play a factor. Doesn't typically when you crown the most valuable player to an extent. But to me, you're going to get into a legitimate conversation here where if Raleigh can, to an extent, reel Judge in terms of what he's able to do in batting average and on base percentage and OPS, then it could make things interesting. If the run saved, which is definitely going to be another thing, his fielding is going to be a nice asset for both guys, but more so Raleigh, given the position he plays at catcher, a 247 average definitely gets, it sounds low when you compare it to right fielder, but when you consider the fact that he's behind the dish, that's a pretty damn good average. So you're going to hear a legitimate conversation. So for me, the panic meter, Big Dumper's running after this MVP thing. And suddenly when it looked like Judge was running away with it, Big Dumper, here he comes, man. So I've got like a 7-1 now in terms of it, because I could see voters going with the guy who was a little bit more flashy, a little bit more sexy with home runs, RBIs, those numbers that are going to light the world on fire a little bit more, and not go for the guy with batting average on base percentage and the fact he was injured. They're going to go with the catcher who doing this behind the dish is something we haven't seen in some time, and it's starting to get to the point where Raleigh might be able to hoist that trophy and crown himself now if he continues this pace.
Yeah, I mean, I would have to agree, and I think what you said that I'm going to highlight is the position he plays, because all year what we've heard is Cal Raleigh's doing this as a catcher. As a catcher, we haven't seen a catcher do this in forever, right? Salvi Perez at the point of his or did he win the MVP? Whatever, that really good year a couple years ago, he was at a DH at that point. He caught a couple games, but that was really it. So Cal Raleigh doing this at the catching position, I think he's going to get a lot of respect from the voters, especially depending on how many more games Aaron Judge misses in right field. If Aaron Judge can get out there and start hitting again and start making some good plays in the outfield, okay, that changes the gap. But if Aaron Judge is stuck at DH the rest of this year and he puts up numbers where his average is higher, let's say it's in the 330s right now. Let's say it falls to 320. His home runs at the moment, I think, are 7 less, might be 6 less after the home run tonight. I think it is 7 less. Whatever the case is, it's only about that many. He's going to have less runs batted in. That the only thing it would come down to then is that extra little bit of fielding. And Cal Raleigh plays the most demanding position on the baseball field. There's no other way to put it. You're getting hit with foul balls. You're crouched down the entire game. Even though you're not throwing 100 pitches, you're also throwing back to the mound 100 times or even more, considering when the bullpen arms come out. Plus, you got to throw runners out. And you're calling the game, too, on the pitch comm most of the time. He plays a much more demanding position. And at this moment, his numbers outside of batting average and WAR are better than Aaron Judge's. And at this point, you almost throw batting average out the door, right? Because nobody considers it a good stat anymore. And I'm one of the few people that hold on to that little bit of batting average. But I tell you, if I had an MVP vote, and this hurts to say, I'd throw it Cal Raleigh's way right now. I would throw it his way 100%, man, maybe 90%, depending on, the standings at the end of the year. I think that does play a factor too. But I mean, there's still plenty of time left. And Aaron Judge, I mean, we keep hearing it from Boone. Aaron Judge has not hit his hot streak yet. He could snap out of this little streak with that home run he hit tonight. He had a walk too. He snaps out of it and he could go on a tear. And within 5 days, we're talking about 1 home run difference. And if it comes down to a minimal amount, I'd say less than 5 home runs, this conversation could probably be thrown out the door because I think Judge's average OPS and WAR would take precedent. I think the home run differential is what's going to tell the final story. And right now, with it being 5+, I think Cal Raleigh holds that advantage. And I hope by the end of the year, things kind of even itself out. But I would say panic-wise, I have to put 0.0 because I honestly couldn't care less about the MVP race. This isn't about the MVP, right? And I know you hate that response. But if you're the captain of the New York Yankees, your MVP doesn't matter. Your MVP award does not matter one bit. What matters is getting to the postseason and winning the postseason. Now, if I want to play into the panic meter, yeah, I'm going to have to go with 7 and say the fact that the MVP race is nearly over if Aaron Judge can't get hot. I know there's still plenty of time, and he homered today, but I would say there's a good chance Cal Raleigh leads at this point, and I would say you got to panic a little bit.
I agree. I mean, you ended up coming in at the same rating when you decided to eventually play my game. But I do actually kind of I know where we're going in terms of the next segment, so I'll just table it until we transition there. But I'm going to sound like a hypocrite because I was the one who led the MVP conversation. I'm the one sitting here banging the drum to have that and talk about that fodder when I think I'm going to be able to lean the same way you're about to lean when we talk about the attitude of this team moving forward. And it kind of starts with El Capitan and him maybe not focusing so much on the MVP and focusing a little bit more on what's going on in the dugout. So I don't know. Any final thoughts on your end on the panic meter? This actually, as much as I was kind of questioning you, was actually probably a pretty good panic meter. I'll give you that.
It was a good conversation. I do want to add on because you going back to last year's game logs for Max Fried, I went to his splits by month in his career. July is statistically his worst month with a 4.05 ERA. He's 10-11 in the month of July. August, he turns it up to a 19-6 record, a 3.11 ERA. Now, we haven't seen that record come to play yet, right? Over the weekend, we didn't see it. And obviously, he's pitched 205 2/3 innings in August in his career. That's the most by any month by a significant total. And then September/October, he gets it up to a 2.44 ERA or gets it down. So, I mean, yeah, in a sense, he's returned to the mean of his career. But in a sense, you also look at those ERA numbers that I just talked about, and they are concerning because a 4.06 in the month of July just became a 6 in the month of July this year. Now, on the same note, I went a little bit further. In losses, in his career, Max Fried has a 6.13 ERA. So when he gets hit hard. And I think that's just what we're seeing, and it's going to take him getting comfortable again after that blister. But I think we can close it. I already mentioned the next segment. I alluded to it quickly, and I said it, returning to the mean. And that's what you hope if you're the Yankees, as Stanton gets his 4th hit of the night to drive in a couple of runs. You hope for the Yankees, you return to the mean. And I brought this up because I continuously listen to ESPN radio and WFAN while I'm in my car. And I even when I'm not in my car. And for weeks on end, anytime I heard Michael Kay talk, he would always mention the Toronto Blue Jays, who were hot when the Yankees were cold. And every time, Kay constantly said they couldn't keep up the pace. They were playing over the pace of the best team in baseball history, and they were not the best team in baseball history. At some point, they would have to return to the mean. And the Blue Jays have somewhat done that. Now, I take it in the Yankee conversation. The Yankees, since June 13th, are playing baseball at a 4.04 winning percentage, 21-31. If they keep that up over their next 43 games heading into tonight, they would finish the season 17-26 with an 80-82 record. Now, this is where I bring this conversation. This team is better than 80-82. This team is better than 500. At some point, this team has to return to the mean. And the Yankees have a great opportunity to do it over their next stretch of games. They got tonight against Minnesota. It's 8-1 in the 7th. You'd like to think, knock on wood, that they're able to close out that game. They've also got tomorrow, Minnesota under 500. You got 2 at Tampa under 500. You also have 3 against Washington, one of the worst teams in baseball. You have 7 games left against the Chicago White Sox. I think they're only better than the Colorado Rockies. You have another 3 games against the Twins on the road. You also have 7 games left against Baltimore, which I don't think are going to be easy, but Baltimore is 53-65 heading into the season. You have 24 games left versus teams under 500. You also have 19 games left versus teams with records over 500. Now, if you were to win every game against a team under 500 and every team and lose every game against teams with a record over 500, you finish 24-19. And do the math. That's over 500. That's good enough, I'd say, for one of the wild card spots. That's about returning to the mean. And you're not going to win every game against teams under 500. You're going to have some really bad losses. But you're also not going to lose every game against teams over 500. And this is the opportunity for the Yankees to find themselves back and to find themselves right in the thick of the wild card. They're still in the thick of the wild card. They haven't exited the standings, and they're not going to with this dominant performance tonight. But it's about time we see that luck flip for the Yankees and they return to the mean.
That felt like a pretty pre-done monologue, man. That was good work, I have to say. That was a little bit
I'm here all night.
A little bit of ESPN radio coming out of Justin Chiavello there.
You don't know how long. A side note, quick. I've almost called in almost every time that Michael Kay has had that sentence, and I always want to say, well, when's it going to happen to the Yankees? And for a while, I was saying maybe the Yankees are this bad team, but it's clear as day. And we'll get into some of the players in a little bit that have also helped this. But it's clear as day that this team is not a team that's under 500. They are a really damn good baseball team with a lot of, accolades under their belts and a lot more to come.
Yeah, I mean, you said it. The opportunity is ripe for the taking. If you go in that stretch.
Wait. You did it wrong, and I did it wrong. That's on me. It's all right there in front of us.
24-19 in that next stretch would get the Yankees to a record of 87-75. That record, like you said, probably gets you one of the wild card spots. Hell, it might get you right back in the mix for the division, probably to be runner-up, though, to one of the 2 teams, likely the Blue Jays. And you also have to consider what that does for momentum, because when you talk about that weaker stretch, it's coming up before the end of this month. You've got those dates that you mentioned with the White Sox on the horizon, the Nationals on the horizon. You actually end the month of August with 7 games against 2 of the worst 3 teams in baseball in the Nationals and the White Sox. You have the Rays, multiple games, or you have the 2 games against the Rays in there. You have the Cardinals this weekend. Cardinals have been, an interesting team. They've ebbed and flowed all season. They're at 61-59, kind of getting through a hot stretch right now of sorts, but I think they're a team that kind of made the decision to toe the line at the deadline.
Closer.
Yeah, they sold, but they didn't have a fire sale, and I think that was kind of no, they didn't pull a Twins. They didn't fire sell. They kind of towed the line of being buyers and sellers, and ultimately just pulled the trigger on their closer. So for me, that's a series that's kind of like the Orioles, that, they might not be teams that make the postseason, but they're gritty, tough teams that are going to fight you tooth and nail. And you have a huge 4-game set with the Red Sox smidged in there as well. But if you can get some momentum from that run against the Cardinals, the Rays, the Red Sox, and of course this series against the Twins, coming out of a disastrous stretch against the Marlins, Rangers, and Stros to start the month of August, then you go into that stretch, those 7 games against some really crappy ball clubs right now. Hope for Nationals fans and White Sox fans it gets better. We both know some people that are their fans. But take the opportunity. It's right there in front of you. If you can win some games against some tough teams here, August could suddenly go from are we out of the swoon? Are we out of it yet kind of month to we're out of the woods and we got a damn real shot to make some noise in the American League. And just like that, the damage that you did in June and July can not be negated fully. We're always going to remember the June and July swoon, but it still can be kind of compensated for in a big way. So, yeah, I agree with you. I think it is right in front of them right now to pull a page out of Boone's book. And, I know there's a lot of people who are still banging the drum for who to be fired. But as we said a week ago, as I'll say again, it's not going to happen. So quit asking for it. It's not going to happen. So to quote Nick Saban there, but it's not going to happen. And the reason is because the Yankees aren't stupid. They know that, like you said, they're a talented ball club. They're a team that doesn't just lay down and die. They never have, never will. And even in the 80 and 82 season, they never did. So they're not going to do it. And there's a good reason why, because they have an opportunity here in this next stretch to climb back up in the standings and make some noise. Now, if they don't do it, then yeah, we're going to look back at this stretch and say that was where the season was lost. June and July was what hurt them. August was what put the nail in the coffin. So even though the stretch is really September, and the stretch is what's going to define whether they get into the postseason and where they rank when they get into the postseason in terms of seeding, this is the stretch that's going to define what the 2025 team's really remembered for.
They're 30 and 34 against teams over 500 at this point. They've got 16 games left against likely AL playoff teams, 19 games left against the division. They are 4 and 19 against the AL East so far this year, or 14 and 19 against the AL East so far this year. They really need to turn that on. You got to get some big wins against those teams that have been problematic. Yeah, the Orioles, you got to get wins against them. They're under 500. Same thing with the Rays when you go down to George M. Steinbrenner Field next week. You got to get those wins. But you also need to pick up some wins against the Blue Jays. You got to pick up wins against the Red Sox, who you're neck and neck with. This could, really flip the wild card in terms of the Red Sox being there up top with the Yankees right now. And it could also flip the division because you're not out of the division race just yet, especially with the Blue Jays returning down to earth. It feels like the Yankees have all the right pieces in play to return back to what the Yankees should be. Maybe not as hot of a start as hot of a streak as they did to begin the season, but certainly something that could put them in a better spot in the postseason and, maybe lead them to a favorable matchup that they could get past that first round and on and have some success no matter who they're playing. Now, we talk about the team itself returning to the mean, but you also have to talk about players themselves starting to return to the mean. We talked about Judge. We talked about Fried and how they need to get back. Volpe has started to return back to the bad. Of course, I wrote that in my notes. And then he goes and homers earlier in this game, and he dropped his bat and had some swagger. Kind of a middle finger to Justin Chevallelli. He's like, you know what? You're going to put down that I'm returning bad. Here's the bird, and I'm not going to do it. But he just basically gave me the, proverbial middle finger after I put down that he's returning to the bad. But since his 4-hit game in Miami coming into the day, he was 5 for his last 31. He was batting 161. Stats prove that he was going down the wrong stretch. And quickly on that, I'm not going to spend time on it. I'm not going to beat the dead horse. But you have Jose Caballero now. You see that Anthony Volpe got hot after some rest. A day's not going to kill you to rest the damn dude. Put in Caballero instead of putting him in right field for Stanton like you just did in this game. And maybe you see, Volpe's stretch of hot hitting continue more than just a couple of games. I digress from there. Obviously, Ahmed Rosario out due to injury kind of messes up some of that. Ben Rice, I think, is a guy that really this conversation should revolve around. You could have this whole segment revolve around Ben Rice. We had talked, I remember the first time we did this via this current new system, and I was sitting on the other side of my basement before I got my desk down here. And, we were talking about Ben Rice. And is it time? Maybe he's not a major league hitter. At some point, if all those unlucky numbers continue, that just means he's not a good hitter. Well, like baseball has its way of working itself out, Ben Rice's numbers are starting to work themselves out. Batting 250 over his last 7, batting 250 over his last 15. His on-base percentage, 346 over his last 15, a 432 slugging. Homered last night. I know he was on base via a walk a few innings ago in this game. So Ben Rice is beginning to percolate. And, you see this because he's also getting more playing time because they finally decided to do something about Austin Wells. Wells, kind of riding the bench more often than not now. 167 over his last 7 games, 118 with a 179 on-base percentage over his last 15, and he couldn't even hit the ball out of the park. He was batting 196. Obviously, JC Esquera's up with the team now, too, because Ahmed Rosario's injured. But back-to-back nights, 4 out of the last 7 for Ben Rice. With Rice's numbers returning, or not really returning because they were never there, but getting to where the mean would tell you and where those stats would tell you, this is a good sign for the Yankees because the catching position has been so dormant offensively this year that now you don't have that hole in your lineup with Rice being in there and with the flexibility that, of all people, Giancarlo Stanton is providing.
It's one of the it's actually two conversations that we had prior to the deadline that are starting to take shape now of that, maybe you free up JC Esquerra to be traded. Well, ultimately it was because they traded everyone else who was playing catcher for Scranton Wilkes-Barre. So they needed somebody, or else we might have saw Clint Frazier come back out of retirement to go behind the dish, because they had to find somebody to catch in Scranton Wilkes-Barre. So ultimately it was JC Esquerra. And so in exchange, yes, that means Ben Rice was going to get more run behind the dish, and we were going to see him in his longest stretch behind the plate that we've seen him in since he was out in Somerset. And really, the returns have been pretty solid defensively. And what I said a couple shows ago kind of hasn't rung true, where, some guys have built all season long this chemistry with Austin Wells as the everyday guy, and maybe there's going to be some fall off if they move to Ben Rice. And it doesn't seem like any of the pitchers are complaining about Ben Rice getting more run behind the dish. And his bat has been much more steady than Austin Wells. When you look at the season's end, it's going to be a big difference in terms of average, in terms of home runs, in terms of barrel rate, and statistically what they've been able to do. But when you look at, some of the big moments, yeah, Rice fell short. Yeah, Wells fell short. But the thing that you haven't had to do with Ben Rice this season is, yeah, he's had some low moments. But when he's had low moments, he's hit, 211, 200 in a 15-game stretch. And, eventually gotten back on track. And part of it was because his playing time and his place in the lineup was shuffled like a deck of cards every other hand. But when it came to Austin Wells, you had some great moments. You have some great moments. And he's a great backup catcher. He's a great platoon catcher. But when you talk at Austin Wells, the bad completely has outweighed the good at points, because his bad moments have been head scratching at the plate, head scratching on the base pass, and they've cost the Yankees some moments this season. So Ben Rice getting more time behind the dish, definitely a welcome sight. And it's definitely something that feels like it rings true with everybody that's come up from Scranton Wilkes-Barre of the prized prospects in this last crop here. When you talk about Ben Rice being a little bit closer to the mean versus a guy like Anthony Volpe, who's ebbed, he's flowed. Wells has ebbed, he's flowed. Dominguez has really been the one who's been the most consistent at the big league level, and this is just his first full season. The only one with less playing time than him really at the big league level and less consistent playing time was Ben Rice. And these two have looked like the stars, whereas Volpe and Wells, like I said, they've had their moments, but the bad at times with both guys has outweighed the good, whereas Rice and Dominguez, they've been closer to that mean. Those are the kind of guys that you can build a team around. We talked about it when they went 80 and 82 that season. The best hitter on the team was Gleyber Torres, who was just over 250. If Alex Verdugo had been added into the lineup that season, he would have been the second best hitter, and he was batting around 247. You're welcoming guys who are batting around 250, 232, and you know what you're going to get with them versus the guys who, like Volpe and Wells, ebb and then they flow. And it's not a game that you want to play when you get into October. And both of them had great October moments a year ago, but right now, Ben Rice, Jason Dominguez, those guys are more sure things than Volpe and Wells. And, say that as Volpe hit a home run tonight, but it's more of looking at things holistically, and that's what it seems like they're finally doing when it comes to Ben Rice in the catcher position.
Yeah, I mean, and you think of the ebbs and flows of Volpe and Wells, and they're small ebbs, or which one's the high point? The flows or the ebbs? Whatever. I don't know, but when they get hot, it only takes them so far, and their cold streaks are well worse than their hot streaks are good, right? If that makes sense. Like, their good isn't great, but their bad is horrible. That type of deal. And they don't return back to a mean. They return back to, I guess, technically the mean, but a bad mean. I mean, Volpe's average 220 something at this point of the season. And I think it peaked against Miami at 223 and then has since been in that, little bit of the struggle. And to see a guy like, Rice be able to take the catching spot from Wells. Paul Goldschmidt's been on the rise again too. His numbers starting to even out, even though it's mainly against lefties again. That's fine. You've actually played a few more lefties lately, so it's worked out. And he's been able to get some big hits off the right-handers. And obviously having Giancarlo Stanton back in the lineup and not having to have the conundrum of, if we put, we have Stanton on the bench, and we also, there was a, possibility that you and I talked about where Rice and Stanton are on the bench, right? But the Yankees have found ways to get him in, and it's helped them start to play better. And I know it's a small sample size, but they took one against Houston And now, you take the first probably 2 games here against Minnesota, and you should go for the sweep. And you've had a lot of success against Minnesota in the past. So it's good to see these guys returning to the mean, and it extends well beyond. It extends to Luke Weaver, who's gone 7 outings in a row now without an earned run. 7 1/3, 1 run. It was unearned. 9 strikeouts, 2 walks, 2 hits. Now 14 outings since July 9th, a 1.69 ERA and a .63 whip. He's back to that form that he was. And, back to that conversation. We probably could have put those stats in the earlier conversation about Bednar, but now he provides as the bullpen returns back to their mean, back to their standard, back to what you expect from that bullpen. And obviously, Will Warren, 2-1 with a 2.84 ERA over his last 7 starts. He's better at home, too. You've clearly got a kid that's comfortable and a guy that's performing, and he found that again last night, and now it's back-to-back starts in a row. And the Yankees have found some success, and a lot of it still hinges on some unproven guys. I mean, but you can't really put Will Warren there anymore. He has found his role on this year's team. And do I expect Will Warren to be better next year? Absolutely. I expect that development to hit. But we know what Will Warren is for the 2025 Yankees, and you'll take that Will Warren. You'll take what you saw last night and what you've seen in the last 7 starts. And Rodon having his, getting back to his mojo after having a 4+ ERA over his last recent stretch of games. And obviously, you're still trying to figure out what Cam Schlittler exactly is in this rotation. And Luis Gil over the weekend finally went over, or in his second start back, went over 5 innings and looked pretty good in doing so. So you have all these guys returning to the mean, returning into positive production. Now, unfortunately, at the same time, you do have some guys trending in the wrong direction. Dominguez, 1 of 15 over his last 7 games. You have Jazz, 10 for 56 over his last 15, but a good game tonight for Jazz Chisholm. And Ryan McMahon, 3 for 16 over his last 7 going into the game. So, yeah, you have some guys going in the wrong way, but you have so many guys going in the right way. And I think where we end this conversation is Giancarlo Stanton. I mean, you just have to applaud what Giancarlo Stanton's been able to do. He has returned, his returning to the mean comes back so much more, right, than just this year and last year. He was a guy that I think it was 2023. You're talking about a guy that's career could be over. His batting average couldn't go over 200, anything like that. He found himself last year, and now after his IL stint, he's come back. He's healthier than ever, clearly, because they're playing him out in right field back-to-back nights. And because of that, because he's willing to, undergo that change back into the outfield, he's hitting and he's providing in a big way for the Yankees. And that is probably the biggest welcome sight. We could talk about Rice finally, evening out. We could talk about Judge homering and tonight. And we could talk about Rodon and Warren and all these guys that we've mentioned. But I think the biggest picture here is Giancarlo is not only returning to form, but he's carrying the Yankees while doing it.
Yeah, I mean, he's batting 300 now after tonight. And tonight is going to be one of those games that we look back on when the season's done for Stanton in an abbreviated campaign that is one of those nights that's pinpointed at the tip of his resume. And luckily, he's one of those guys that didn't burn you. We talked about how Volpe and Judge burnt you with your show prep earlier today. But when you talk about Stanton, he just added the cherry on top to what has been an incredible performance. And I started saying it about, what happened with Rice and Wells, and I kind of went off my point there. But, that was one of the 2 things I talked about big at the deadline that I haven't followed up on is, first, you and I both made the case that needs to be the platoon at this point. Rice and Wells and JC either get moved or go somewhere or go back down to Scranton Wilkes-Barre, whatever it needed to be. The deck needed to be shuffled behind the plate. But we also both talked about how the designated hitter spot and the guy who Bob Costas compared to a dog that needed to be put down in the ALCS a season ago was kind of just clogging up space while he was still hitting at the time around 270 in his return. And we were pretty harsh to him. And, we have sent memes back and forth to each other where we have been brutal. And everybody has been brutal to him on Twitter. And I get it. It's kind of a running gag that at this point in his career, the mountain of a man doesn't have the most athleticism in terms of his running ability. But you know what? He can hit a ball a hell of a lot farther than any keyboard warrior either you or I could do combined or most people on the planet. And that's why already he's a hell of a guy to have in the lineup. But he looks like Giancarlo Stanton from that ALCS who's telling Bob Costas to shove it right now because he's also playing right field. and he's also doing a pretty solid job. And then you add on all of this, he looks like the best hitter in the lineup right now. And, we talked about a world after Juan Soto that had, despite the fact that Giancarlo Stanton had raked in the postseason and helped get them to that point and compensate for Judge's struggles, we talked about, after Judge, it's going to have to be Belly or Chisholm or Goldschmidt. And, we talked about Stanton as a part of that conversation, but I don't think either of us, and I'm going to put my hand up, you can say your end of it like you did, but we completely and severely have discredited Giancarlo Stanton in the last year since that incredible run in the ALCS and the ALDS and in the World Series that helped get the Yankees to where they were at. And now he's just only amplified that. And so I apologize to you, Giancarlo Stanton. I know you're probably not listening to this. I know you probably don't give a shit, to be frank. But it's true. I mean, we have definitely underscored his impact on this team and certainly have done it so far this season because he has been on an absolute tear since he got back from injury. He's found his rhythm in this last stretch and looks like one of the best hitters in baseball and looks like Stanton of old. And he's not just being a hole that you can't fill and move around because right now he's playing the field too and he's doing a serviceable job. So Stanton is like the Yankee of August right now. And the way he's playing, he might be the Yankee of the fall again.
Yeah, I mean, I'm not going to apologize to Giancarlo Stanton because I feel like if I do the same thing you did,
you're too proud, man.
No. I think he's going to start, going
Sucking.
through a slump, right? Based off every note I had in my doc tonight that went wrong, as the Yankees closed the win 9-1, one hitting the Minnesota Twins tonight, so 2 in a row, which is good to see. But I mean, when you talk about Giancarlo Stanton, what?
In our lifetime, it's now 125-44 against the Twins.
Crazy. Keep playing them. You've got tomorrow and you've got 3 more. You got 4 more games against the Twins. You better win them all. But just
sorry.
On the Giancarlo point, I mean, I'll be honest, I was telling the Yankees, I was saying on our show back at Com Radio, I don't know if I've said it since we've gotten to this format, but I was saying get rid of the damn guy. Cut your losses. Find a way to get him out. Even if you have to ship him with a top prospect involved, get him off the roster. He takes up too much space. He's not flexible. And I don't think the Yankees will play him in right field too much once Judge is healthy. But this is my personal opinion. We don't know anything. I personally think Judge won't be healthy the rest of this season. So I think you're going to have to play, a platoon out in right field. And whoever's not in right field is DHing. And I don't expect Judge to return to full-time right field duties except for maybe in October. Right. But at the end of it, what Giancarlo's done is he's awoken at the right time for a team that needed somebody. And now when you think about that, you think of a guy who's locked in. He took an extra base the other night. Now, it was a little error out there, but he took the extra base the other night. And
he was hauling.
He ripped one to the wall tonight that I expected him to go for just a single because it was hit so hard. And we've seen that time and time again. Got a double out of it. He's energized. And I think he being energized, it leads to everything else. Just like I talked about Bednar, with one piece in place, everything else can start falling into place. It feels like it's the same way with Stanton. And because of Stanton's hot stretch, Judge will start hitting again. Jazz will heat back up. All these guys will get going. And the Yankees offense will be, it's been one of the best in the league in every statistical category this year, even in the hard times. And I think there's another level to be unlocked because you've been on these hard times for so long. Now, if we don't finish up this episode soon, we're going to both have big time attitudes tomorrow. But let's finish quickly with the old time attitudes. Old Timers Day this past weekend brought out, the best in Yankee history. A bunch of guys that, you and I grew up watching, a bunch that we didn't even get to watch. Let's be quite frank here. We were relatively young, and if you didn't play from likely 2009 on, we probably don't know you very well, but you know of them because they're former Yankees. The history runs deep, but some of them did have some attitudes this weekend, and you and I agreed. We were sending them back and forth to each other saying, don't let this guy leave the dugout. Make sure he's the manager by the end of the weekend, right? And it's all in good fun between you and I in those texts, but at the same time, they make really good points. We start with Jorge Posada saying they got to get a little angry. They need to have a chip on their shoulder. You can't be friends with everybody. I want to start with that quote because, while it was being dissected on all the channels and all the social medias, this to me seems like a direct message to Aaron Boone saying, you can't be friends with everybody. And if it's not to Aaron Boone, it's to the other Aaron. It's to Aaron Judge, who got DJ LeMahieu to stick around a lot longer than he probably should have. Either way, Jorge Posada did not mince his words. And I don't disagree with him. But your thoughts on what Posada said?
You called in a pretty passionate plea over the past couple shows, and more particularly last show, for the captain to be the captain to step up, guide the team out of this slump, yada, yada, yada. The one thing that I think you and I can both say, as we're both very big Aaron Judge fans, is he got thrust into an unwinnable role. Shoes that were the size of LeBron James, Michael Jordan combined, having to succeed the captain in Derek Jeter. And he's done a hell of a job. And like we kind of talked about earlier, to round off the point and go full circle at the conclusion of this show, he might be the most valuable player this season. That's still a good chance. He's still got a shot, even if Big Dumper keeps raking. But the reality is that Aaron Judge has been a hell of a ball player. Aaron Judge has been the captain, but it's time for Aaron Judge to be a real captain, be the leader. Stop trying to be friends with everybody. Stop trying to be Mr. Good Guy. I want to see a little bit more A-Rod and a little less Jeter. I want to see the guy who's going to say, have an attitude. Call shit as you see it. Be a little bit aggressive, because that's kind of the Aaron Judge the Yankees need right now, because guys are raking. Guys are doing well. And we know how pissed off Aaron Judge was internally. He said it in the offseason. He has made it very clear that what he did to round out the season last year was not befitting of who he is as a ball player. And if they get back to that stage, he doesn't want to do the same thing. It's one thing to say it. It's another thing to start acting like it, because it's one thing to do it on the field. But if you don't do it off the field too, as the captain of the Yankees, a job that you gunned for, that you bargained for, then why go for the title? Because what you do on the field when it comes to Aaron Judge is 3/4 of the story. For everyone else, that's just about 100% of the story. Judge needs to speak up. Judge needs to be angry. It shouldn't be Ben Rice saying, we don't know if there's accountability, fundamentals. It shouldn't be the guy who's in his first real full season. It should be the guy who's 33 years old, going on 10 years as a pro, and is the captain of the Yankees. Posada's right. Randolph's right. Nobody's afraid of the Yankees anymore because they just want to hold their hand and sing kumbayas. Stop being Mr. Nice Guy. Stop being – it's time. You know what? John Cena went from Mr. Make-A-Wish, Mr. Nice Guy in WWE. He turned into an asshole. He turned into a heel. I don't want a full-blown Aaron Judge heel turn. Still do the good stuff. Still help the kids. Still be a great guy. But when you get in that locker room, be an a-hole. Call shit as you see it. Hold people accountable and get angry.
I mean, I gotta say, we might have to switch to this late night spot every single week. We've had, I think, one of the better shows to date. I did not expect a John Cena reference to be thrown in here on today's show. But I mean, I was listening again to Michael Kay, and they were talking about the Posada quote specifically. And we'll get to Randolph in a minute because I think it's a bigger picture item here with Willie's quote. But for Posada's quote, you know, Michael Kay was saying that was never Jeter. Jeter wasn't getting in guys' faces. Posada would do that. Jorge would go into the locker room and scream and shout and tell someone, you know, to be better and to turn around and tell the umpire off and all that stuff, right? And I think that's the big picture, is somebody needs to be that guy. Look, I don't know if it needs to be Aaron Judge. I don't know if you need the face of your franchise to take somebody, you know, by the shirt in the dugout and say, hey, you need to perform better. But at least, you know, it's stupid that this is the thing I think of. But remember when Jonathan Papelbon got in a fight with his own teammate because I think it was a fielding error or whatnot, right? You don't need to be fist fighting your teammates, but make sure you're on them. Make sure Austin Wells, you know, knows he was an idiot, right? I know he said that, but somebody in that dugout, and it shouldn't be Ben Rice. As much as I love the fact he did it, it shouldn't be him because, like you said, he's in his first full year. It should be a Judge or maybe a Stanton, I think, would fit that realm perfectly. It's not really in their, you know, it doesn't feel at least that it's in their, you know, repertoire to do that, but there's got to be someone that can light that fire. And Posada's right. You can't be friends with everyone. And you got to let Wells know he messed up. You got to let Jazz know he messed up. You got to let Jorbit Vivas, even in his small stint, know that the Yankees don't tolerate this type of stuff, this bad play, right? Those stupid mistakes. You know, I think the Yankees do need that. And I think it starts with the manager. And I think the other day kind of showed me something with Boone. And this is a whole different point for a whole different time, but I want to mention it. Aaron Boone got ejected from Sunday's game against the Yankees. In the past, that would light the fans on fire. That would light the players on fire. To me, watching that game, felt like no one gave a crap that Aaron Boone went out there and got tossed. And now it was one of the worst ejections I've seen. Boone said a couple words from the dugout. He was tossed. He tried to plead his case for a little bit, but nobody really seemed to get lit up and have that passion after Boone got ejected. And I think to me, that's kind of what we're talking about here. Have that chip on your shoulder. Go out, have that fight. And, if Boone goes and does something, he wasn't friends with the home plate umpire that day. Good. Back him and make the other team pay. And I want to finish on the Willie Randolph quote because I think it's more telling of a bigger picture problem for the Yankees over the last, few years. Teams aren't afraid of us anymore. We need to get that mojo back. I look at this specifically for the Boston Red Sox, right? Couple big series with the Red Sox down the stretch. And the last time the Red Sox and Yankees played, I texted you and said, this rivalry just doesn't feel like it exists anymore. And even against Houston this weekend, right? Houston is the new school rivalry because of all the postseason, meetings and everything that happened with the cheating scandal that likely robbed the Yankees of a World Series berth, right? Didn't even feel like that rivalry existed. You don't see those fights, and I know MLB has done everything in their power not to have that happen anymore, but you don't see that energy, that passion against these teams. Yeah, no crap the Red Sox can come in and sweep your ass back in June. No crap that, a lot of these teams are able to take 2 or 3 games out of you because they're not afraid, because there is no mojo. Have some swagger. That's why you and I love Jazz Chisholm, right? He plays with that chip on his shoulder every single day. And I think a big thing that we've seen over the last couple of games, and I don't know if it's going to get Jazz in trouble, if it's going to get him hit by pitches at some point, but he's relaying signs from second base. He's got that mojo, right? He might be in a struggle hitting wise, but he pointed, and we don't know if he's just bluffing or whatnot because we haven't seen post-game quotes. He pointed and gave a signal to Volpe, and Volpe goes and hits a home run, right? We don't know if that's what it is, but that's what we're talking about. Be afraid to play the Yankees because they might be taking your signs perfectly legally from second base. As much as it's frowned upon, it is legal. Be that team that teams don't want to face again. Be the Yankees. Be that team that packs Yankee Stadium every freaking day, even if it's, 25 degrees in April with some rain, but you're that team that something good. You have to have a, box of popcorn in front of you because some action is going to take place. That's what I think the Yankees have lacked for a while. It almost feels like Tyler Austin was the last guy to bring that for the Yankees, slamming his bat down in Boston. Austin Romine getting in a fight with Miguel Cabrera against the Detroit Tigers. Since then, I can't think of a moment in time where the Yankees were, a force to be reckoned with in a sense. And you got two of the biggest guys in baseball standing right next to each other, Judge and Stanton, and you still can't elicit any reaction from any other team. Get back to your old ways. They need to. I fully agree with Willie Randolph.
Yeah, you got two gentle giants. That's what it seems like. You got one of the smaller guys on the team out there ready to start fights and throw hands in Jazz. But on a more real sense, I think it's kind of the brand of the Yankees at this point has gotten bigger than the Yankees being hated. The brand of the Yankees itself, and this might be a bigger episode in the offseason, it feels like the institution that is the N with the Y through it has become a lot bigger than the Yankees even know how to manage. It feels like everything kind of goes in line with that. When you talk about the fact that the Yankees would never make a managerial firing midseason, that hell, they wouldn't even fire a hitting coach until a couple years ago. When you talk about the Yankees, being reluctant to move on from guys like DJ LeMahieu or even the Brett Gardners of the world towards the tail end of his career, when you talk about being able to actually make the hard decisions, actually do the things that aren't going to get you liked and sometimes might not put asses in seats, or do the opposite effect. They might put asses in seats, but not there with their popcorn with a smile on their face, like you said, but rather there to jeer and to boo and to get angry. And then you have the same kind of commentators calling for that, going out and saying, well, why are you booing a guy like that? Do what the Phillies did. Do what they did with Trey Turner and cheer him on. Phillies are one of the most fickle fan bases in baseball. And hell, we just came out of Pennsylvania for 4 years. I had more fun sometimes watching the Phillies than the Yankees. I mean, that moment, the singing and Harper Goes Yard will go down as one of the most iconic moments. They fight for their guys, they fight for each other, and in turn, they've been a more fun team to watch at points in the postseason and in this time of the year than the Yankees, who sometimes feel like the institution, the brand, the front office, they're trying so hard to keep all their, keep all their ducks in order and in a row that they're afraid to see somebody go out of line. They're afraid to see somebody kind of challenge the system, the institution that is the Yankees, by possibly besmirching the name or the logo or doing something that, oh no, might get you in trouble with the league or somebody else. Aaron Boone going out there and getting ejected and being the active managing leader in ejectives doesn't move the needle. It doesn't move me from this chair.
Because it
And I
doesn't
don't
feel
think it's
genuine.
moving.
It doesn't feel
No.
genuine. It feels forced, especially after
Yes.
on Saturday you have all these guys saying this, and on Sunday you go get tossed. Yeah, it's not
Yeah.
genuine.
It
It
just
doesn't
feels
feel
like
genuine.
it's not even inspiring the players anymore. It
No.
was fun when it was Savages in the box.
Yeah.
It was fun when it felt like the players actually cared that he was getting ejected. But now it just feels like he's doing it for show and not for anything else. Like you said, you do it the day after two legends in Randolph and Posada, amongst others, called you guys out on your shit, called you out on being the institution and not being worried about winning championships anymore. It seems like this is a team that's almost become more of a tourist attraction than a legitimate ball club when it comes to that. As a whole, yes, they're still the Yankees. They're still a damn good team. They're still a team that looks at 80 and 82 as one of the worst marks in decades, or 82 and 80 rather, as one of the worst marks in decades, whereas some teams would use that as a measuring stick for years to come. The Yankees are still a damn good ball club. The Yankees are still, despite all that we have said in these last couple weeks, still more than capable of winning their 28th World Series this season. But sometimes the lack of being able to kind of let somebody step out of line, let somebody be the black sheep, let somebody take some chances, get in trouble, that kind of institution being bigger than the game itself and being bigger than the players, it's not the Yankees. It's the tourist attraction. It's not the 2009 Yankees, and it sure as hell isn't the early 2000s, late 90s Yankees. And we got to see a taste and a sliver of that the other day. And it's got me fired up. I know it's got you fired up. It wants me back to those days that we weren't even alive for, because those were the Yankees that we were brought up on. And these are the Yankees of kind of more so the trickle-down effect of this being more of a brand and less of a ball club.
It feels in a sense that it's been that way, and I hate to bring the conversation back, but I say it often. It feels like it hasn't been that way since Girardi left. Girardi not only was able to do it, and feel real when doing it, but his players bought right back into it. Almost all of Boone's ejections this year, I can think that the player stopped arguing, right? And the player just walked away. I can think of several times where CC Sabathia is on the top step of the dugout, and obviously early in Boone's tenure when Brett Gardner's banging the roof. Maybe it's the guys on the team, but at the end of it, there's some change. And I think you said it best there in saying it's more of that tourist attraction. It's more about the brand. It's about having Star Insurance on the side of your jersey. It doesn't feel that the pinstripes are the pinstripes anymore, right? It feels like before you know it, last names will be back on the jerseys, and you'll be playing for the name on the back rather than the NY interlocking on the front and for those pinstripes. And to me, I think there is a sense here that a lot of the older guys are getting frustrated. A lot of the former Yankees are getting frustrated with that fact because of what they did to make the Yankees what the Yankees are. Yeah, you can look at all the history books and say that, well, they're the winningest team and that they've had all these great superstars. But at the end of it, the Yankees are known for the Yankees because of the contributions of a lot of the guys that we're hearing this from. And they don't feel like they're getting that from this current crop of players or manager or the general manager or this really ownership group. And I know a lot of the guys at Old Timers Day played under during George Steinbrenner's era of owning the New York Yankees. But Hal's got to do something about it too. Hal's got to find a way to fire this fan base up, fire this franchise up, fire all the guys up, and get back to it. And I hate to say it again, but changing your beard policy for one guy who wasn't willing to go with it, who, by the way, did show up to spring training shaved, but if that's the case, because technically it was never confirmed, they changed it for Devin Williams, but every sign points to it, even changing that stupid little rule takes you away from being the New York Yankees and representing those pinstripes like they're the pinstripes. And I think this old timers day, they got back to the baseball. They were able to play that fun little game. Unfortunately for Mariano
Fun for
Rivera,
everybody but Mo.
yeah, unfortunately for Mariano Rivera, he injured his Achilles, tore his Achilles while playing center field or left field or right field, whichever field it was. But it felt like this year, with the game being back and with all the personalities seemingly coming together for the first time since COVID, they're fired up. And it feels like for the first time since before COVID, the Yankees are going to have to take action and get back to it. And I think they do have the opportunity. Last year's postseason run was great, but you have to do it in more than just the postseason. You have to have that swagger, that confidence throughout the entire regular season so that teams like Boston, who you're neck and neck with in the wild card, they don't want to see you in a couple of weeks. And I can tell you, I don't know anything about Boston, right? I'm not in their locker rooms. I don't really follow the Red Sox unless I have to. I could tell you they're not going to be scared to face the Yankees, especially after the performance the last time the Yankees played them. So I think it's fair to say Jorge, Willie Randolph, any other guy who came out and said it, they're right. They are straight up right about the current state of the New York Yankees. It's got us fired up. I think you said it best. Maybe we should talk about it for a longer episode in the offseason.
It's a good idea for the offseason.
When things get dry. As always, make sure you follow us on Instagram and Twitter or X, whatever you want to consider it, at Bomber Boys Pod. Subscribe to our YouTube, Bomber Boys Podcast. Follow us on Spotify, Bomber Boys Podcast. We can't thank you all enough for your constant support. Dylan, anything fun this weekend?
Or coming up in general?
Or just
I was playing with my light.
I saw your
that
face
was my fun.
Changing colors.
Not only that, but off air, I'll have to tell you, I got back into Legos. So it's a new hobby that I'm picking up again. We're clearly keeping things young and fresh as we get into our ripe old ages of 21 and 22 in our post grad life.
I'm getting back into reading, and you're getting back into Legos. Which, funny story, real quick. Over the weekend at Barnes & Noble's, picking up my next set of books that I'm going to read, Bill Walton and Stuart Scott, after I finish Kenny
Stuart
Albert.
Scott one's incredible.
Have you read it?
Yeah.
I'm looking forward to it. There was Lego sets, and my mom straight up said, "You want a Lego set?" And I said, "Yeah, that's probably the next thing I'm going to get back into." There's about probably 25, 30 Lego sets right to my left over here in my basement.
I'm back into it, and if I bought a bonsai tree one, so once I do finish it, it's going to be an office decor piece for me. But speaking of the office, from 10 to 3, starting tomorrow, actually, whenever we post this, Wednesday through next Tuesday, I'll be filling in on 98.3 WSUL, our pop station, as the voice of the midday mix, filling in with for our host Jen Clark. She's going to be in Peru for about a week or so. So yeah, if you're bored, pop on some pop on the Radio Bold app and listen to me narrate, I guess, the midday mix and some pop hits.
And do I dare tease the fact that me, you, and some of the other guys are getting back together this weekend?
We're getting the band back together, man.
For the Catskills Sports Report with Dylan Price, but a little bit of a special for college football. And then it's going to go beyond just your show, and the boys will all be back for a full-time podcast. That's right. The band is back together, as Dylan said. Dylan, I knew you were going to ask me, what do I have going on? Absolutely nothing, as always. Was thinking about the Yankee game tomorrow night, but I don't know. They got some mojo back, and I'm not sure I want to do that.
Don't jinx it. You got a bad record going to games.
I'll keep. Yeah, I have a horrible record going to games. I'll keep on with my books and my Xbox, and of course, Bomber Boys. You can catch us, I guess, every Tuesday has become our schedule, with the post going up on Wednesday. But we thank you for spending this last hour and nearly 20 minutes with us. For Dylan Price, I'm Justin Chevela. See you next week.